Thank you all for dialing in to today's webinar on final preparation for MHSRS, the largest military medical conference of the year. I am Liz Powell, and I am the founder of G2G Consulting, which stands for Government to Growth. I will kick things off today, but we've got a really exciting guest speaker today that we want to make sure we get to. So with that, I'd love to go to the next slide, please. So here's the agenda of what we're going to cover, just a little bit of an overview of us and the series that we've been doing on MHSRS and ways to collaborate with the Department of Defense. Our main speaker is Lloyd Rose. I will give you his background in a minute. He is phenomenal. I've had the pleasure of working with him for several years now, and always a wonderful resource and partner. And we'll close out with some Q&A and just a discussion. Greg, my colleague, is going to really get into the details of MHSRS and sort of what to expect as you're planning. Hopefully by now you have reserved your seat for the conference and you've reserved a hotel. Those are going fast. So hopefully you're starting to get organized, but any questions that you have, we are here to answer and help you through that process. So with that, I'd love to go to the next slide. So before I get into the background on G2G, I just want to make sure folks know that we are recording and we will post this and make sure those who have RSVP'd for today get the link to the recording. So if there's anything you missed, you can catch it afterwards. And we, of course, are available always by email. So just a little bit about G2G. Some of you know us, some of you are new to us. G2G stands for Government to Growth. We're all about growth, especially high-tech innovation and the life sciences. I started G2G 15 years ago now. We're in our 15th year. And since then, we've helped raise over $413 million in government funding for our clients. Much of that is in that health innovation space. Some is in other spaces as well. I think all are in that change maker space, really trying to make a difference in the world. We definitely do a lot with life sciences, but high-tech innovation overall. We partner with DoD quite a bit, but all the agencies can be great partners in bringing innovation to market and to patients who really need it. So something to note. We've worked in a bunch of different places. We're located in the Midwest, DC, and have lots of partnerships in different areas of the country. We have a real connection with a lot of the bio chapters, and hopefully some of you are members of those state bio organizations. They can be a great resource for you and great partners with us. And then you can see some of the other health organizations, defense organizations that we've partnered with over the years. Next slide, please. Lloyd Rose. So Lloyd heads up the BioFabUSA, and he's going to tell you a little bit about that now, but he has such a wealth of experience. As you can see from this slide, we wanted to highlight some of his key experiences that really relate to military medical work. I have to say, I got to know Lloyd, I don't even know how many years ago. It's been a while, and he is just so easy to work with, very eager to help, gives great advice, and is very, very committed to military medicine. He really wants to bring innovation forward to help the warfighter, to help our military service members and their families. His dedication is really remarkable. And he's just has a wealth of knowledge and wisdom and connections, knows who to talk to, just a wonderful resource. So again, I want to make sure you saw all the different places that he's worked over the years, and you'll get to hear from Lloyd in just a minute here. We thought it would be helpful to have Greg give an overview of MHSRS so you can plan for that before we hear from Lloyd. But with that, I'd love to pass it over to Greg and go to the next slide.
Great. Thanks a lot, Liz. Appreciate that introduction. And hi, everybody. And just to also echo Liz's welcome to those who are new to G2G. And it's wonderful to see so many familiar names that we've worked with over the years and months. And I just wanted to mention that my role at G2G, in addition to working with a lot of bioscience, high-tech startup companies and kind of helping them navigate through the the DoD space, the BARDA space, just kind of that non-dilutive funding space. We publish a government bioscience grants report every month. And with that, we also host a free webinar on the third Friday of every month. So that's going to actually fall 2 days from now. And many of your names I see also dial into that. So I just wanted to mention that we have this GBG reporting service that helps to identify grants and non-dilutive funding opportunities, DoD, NIH, BARDA, I mean, just the whole spectrum of opportunities. So just wanted to just kind of quickly put that plug in. And if you have any questions about that, you can let us know. But for the purpose of today, just wanted to mention the Military Health System Research Symposium, give a little bit of overview. Liz mentioned at the top of the webinar that this is the largest military medical conference of the year. And you know, the title of it really speaks volumes that it's optimizing readiness, the power of military medical research. So it is a research symposium. You know, it's as being the largest, wanted to mention that this is the first year that it is coming back after 2 years of COVID. So the last time this whole group met was back in 2019. And there is an eagerness by the Department of Defense, the program managers, the researchers, industry to really get back to this conference because it is such a great opportunity for networking, presenting new scientific knowledge and innovations that are really for unique, military unique research and development. And at its height, I saw estimates that 3,500 to 4,000 attendees come to this conference each year. It is open to obviously military personnel. It's open to civilians, including academia and industry folks. And I mean, just a wide variety. And I talk about it as potentially being like the JP Morgan of the military. So if you're familiar with that, this is a huge deal where you can go and network and get new ideas or present yours. And DoD leadership will be there, you know, so the decision makers, program managers like Lloyd, and really eager to have him talk about his experience and have this open dialogue here in a few minutes, just about how to really prepare for that. So the registration is open, and this is going to be held September 12th through 15th at the Gaylord Palms Resort in Kissimmee, Florida. It's a little bit later than they usually host it every year. It's been typically around this time in August. But go to this website there if you haven't attended. The other thing I want to mention while I'm thinking of it is that you don't have to attend MHSRS to get benefit from it. So even if you're not going, the tips that Lloyd and we are going to talk about are things that you can translate to other conferences or other ways to engage with government and the DoD, whether you go or not. Obviously, we think it's a great thing to go. So just to give you a little bit of idea, so let's go to the next slide. And I've mentioned already some of this, but just wanted to re-highlight that, you know, this is for private industry, academia and clinicians, researchers, the healthcare leadership, program managers, VA contacts. I mean, a wide variety of folks. Over the course of 4 days, there are 65 different breakout sessions, and just wanted to drill down a little bit so you can start to think about how your company, your technology innovation could fit into this space. But they break this down into some categories around medical readiness, expeditionary care, warfighter performance, return to duty, women's health. And under those kind of general areas of interest, there are even like more specific topics of interest, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But there are over 360 oral presentations, 1,200 poster presentations, and then these plenary sessions. There's a huge exhibit hall with companies and DoD directorates and entities that actually exhibit. So again, we can't overemphasize the fact that it's a great place to get insights into what the DoD is looking for, network, and just get exposure to the military, especially if you've never worked there before or worked with them before. Some other areas that I just want to mention, so to be thinking about combat casualty care, operational medicine, clinical and rehabilitative medicine, simulation and information sciences, infectious diseases, radiation health effects. These are all things that kind of cross over into this conference and are worth noting. So let's go to the next slide. And here is just a little bit of a closer look at some of the topics that are going to be covered. If you go to that website that I had up on an earlier slide, and as Liz said, we'll send these slides out to everybody. You can actually see the actual breakout sessions, and the full agenda is now posted on the website. But you can see the span of topics here of interest around infectious disease or psychological health and resilience, pain management, TBI, and this neurotrauma and battlefield treatments is a huge issue for the DoD. For years now, when we go to this conference, we hear the military, think tanks and movers and shakers talking about, the future battlefield for conflict is going to be against near peer adversaries, and there's a lot of talk about point of care or prolonged field care, that not having air superiority or being long distances from medical treatment are going to require the need to bring technology, bring medical innovation to the point of injury. So you'll hear a lot about that and in-route care. There's interest in non-compressible torso hemorrhage control, regenerative medicine therapies, which is actually Lloyd's expertise. So I'm sure he can talk a little bit more about that. And also issues around treating neuromusculoskeletal injuries, even stress and adjustment disorders that happen for military service members. And there's an interest in AI, machine learning, health IT, burn injury management, trauma resuscitation. So I just hope that that gives a flavor of how broadly the topics are at this conference. And, if we've done other webinars, this is kind of a part 2 to a webinar we did back in June, where we featured a company that has presented a few times at MHSRS and actually now has a subcontract award to do some research with them. But this is just really a great opportunity to engage. So I'm going to pause there because I want to leave plenty of time for Lloyd to give his background, and then we're going to open up just kind of a fireside chat dialogue to just talk about the conference and really encourage your participation and questions. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll turn it over to our friend and special guest, Lloyd Rose.
All right, thanks, Greg. It's really, and Liz, it's really a pleasure to be here to be able to talk to everybody about kind of how you can benefit from this conference and kind of the strategies to do that. And I'll give that advice to the extent that I can. But first, I just want to give a brief background of kind of what I'm doing at the DoD, what I have done. So I've been working in the regenerative medicine space for a little over 10 years now. Starting as a postdoctoral fellow and then moving into program management in Fort Detrick at the U.S. Army Medical Research and Development Command. And when I first came into this position, the regenerative medicine field was really burgeoning, but also coming up against some real difficult obstacles when it came to moving therapies out of the lab and into the clinic and ultimately into commercialization. And so in order to try and overcome some of the difficulties that were being experienced there, the Department of Defense, the Office of the Secretary of Defense in particular, put out a funding opportunity announcement for an advanced tissue biofabrication manufacturing innovation institute. And the DoD has sponsored 8 other of these institutes in all sorts of different areas, flexible hybrid electronics, functional fabrics, advanced additive manufacturing, et cetera. And so this one was the first one that was focused on biology and medical sort of needs. And the award was made to the Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Institute, which is based in Manchester, New Hampshire. And they have as their mission to make practical the scalable, consistent, cost-effective manufacturing of engineered tissues and tissue-related technologies. One of the big areas that was observed as a stumbling block was the ability to manufacture these ways and these products in a consistent and cost-effective way. And even if a lot of what people have been doing, as some of you no doubt know, is very manually intensive, and it becomes very difficult to scale that. You can obviously add more people to do the same tasks, but really that's just a scale out sort of a situation. And we won't really need to get to a point where we're not relying on the hands of experts to do all of these, of expert pipetters to put together all of these products, but to figure out how we can automate those processes. So if we could go to the next slide. So the way that this institute, and all of the institutes indeed are anticipated to work is that obviously all products are slightly different, but many of them are using very similar sorts of base functionality. So to the extent that the institute can kind of develop these sort of platform, non-competitive, pre-competitive sort of technologies that everybody can use so that everybody's not having to reinvent the wheel and build everything from scratch themselves, then we've shortened the route to product transition. So what BioFab is offering in this space is those platform manufacturing sort of activities. They have a tissue foundry line, which they have been working for the past several years, which allows complete end-to-end automated manufacturing of products, cells in one end, products out the other. And of course, again, every product's slightly different, so some things are more automatable than others, but we currently have some products that are completely produced in a completely automated fashion. There's also infrastructure in the form of a lab space for smaller entities and companies and who can work with the regulatory consulting team at BioFabUSA, as well as the process development team, where they can help take manual processes and convert them into automated processes. There's also partnering. There's the meetings that they have there on, twice a year are great opportunities for partnering with both the Institute and with the other members of the Institute. Establishing those sort of collaborations has really been seen as a value add by the membership. So, and just to mention, I mentioned a couple of meetings. There are 2 each year, and it's a 3-day event. 2 days are open to everyone. 1 day is a member-only day. The meeting that is coming up is October 25th to 27th. If you look up Army BioFabUSA, you will be able to find their events, and I certainly encourage you to attend if you can. Next slide. So currently this represents the membership of the Institute from across the country, although the Institute itself is located in Manchester, New Hampshire. Members from all over the country, still working on some of those states where we don't have members, but certainly the places you can see there, lots of them are hubs of activity in Texas, California, New England, etc. Currently, there's 191 members. About 80% of these are, or 75% of them are small businesses and large companies. The rest are academic institutions. And of those industries, about 80% are small business. So there's lots of opportunities there to kind of engage with both big industry leaders who may be sources of funding for products, as well as some government funding to help develop manufacturing processes for regenerative medicine products. So that's basically what I was going to highlight of what I'm currently doing for the DoD. So next slide. So I'll just briefly go into, before we open up for any sort of questions, I'll talk a little bit about kind of what my experiences have been at MHSRS over the years and what we're always looking for when we're there. So when I was still a student and I would go to these sorts of conferences, any type of conference, I was mostly focused on going to the technical sessions and so on and so forth. What I find the most useful now is the meetings that we end up having with people such as those of you on the webinar today, and just kind of getting firsthand communications with people who are developing products that may be of interest to us. It's also extremely useful to be able to impart to those of you who are developing those products kind of how this sort of field differs from what many people are interested or used to when they get government funding, such as when they get funding from the NIH or the NSF or something of that nature. The NIH, as I'm sure most of you are aware, generally funds investigator-driven research. And so any sort of good idea that you have that's scientifically sound and scores well in peer review, you have a good chance to get funded, and it's not based on specific requirements. Much of what we're looking for, however, is based on very specific requirements and not exclusively investigator-driven. Many of the things are investigator-driven. If, for example, through the congressionally directed medical research program, they're more likely to have a little broader ability to fund that sort of stuff. But from most of what I have dealt with in the past several years, we're looking for very specific things that focus on the very specific injuries that warfighters are likely to encounter or be subject to. And so I really have found it valuable at MHSRS when I'm meeting with people to make sure they understand some of the very unique sort of characteristics that products in this space need. And so sometimes people have been taken a little back when I've gone into the details of why their particular research is not really kind of pointed in the right direction, because obviously everybody has good ideas. So it's one of those things where your idea may be fantastic, but it may still not be exactly suitable for as you're working on it, suitable for what the Department of Defense needs. And so I tell people that I don't want people like trying to develop something for me that's ultimately not going to be successful. So all of those sort of questions about what makes these products unique from a DoD perspective, beyond just that they're a good idea, and maybe even that they work better than something that already exists. All of these sorts of things kind of it's better to have a just face-to-face conversation about those sort of topics. One of the other things that I will mention is although we always like to think that we're open to anybody's interactions, anybody's contacts, and that we're easy to find. We're not easy to find. And people who are working on this sort of stuff may not really know who they're supposed to talk to or how to get in touch with them if you do. You can't just go on to MRDC's website and look us up and say, oh, there's the phone number for this particular portfolio manager or whatever. So this is a good opportunity to try and find those people, because for the most part, we're in charge of a lot of the breakout sessions. And so we're there. If you can contact us then and make a point of contact with us at that point, we're very happy to continue those conversations both at MHSRS and beyond that. So it's just a good opportunity to get those contacts and figure out who you need to talk to. So those are the things that I'm just going to start with right there, and I'm absolutely happy to expand on any of that further or take any additional questions that anyone might have.
That's great. That's great, Lloyd. And Liz, maybe if you unmute, we can kind of do our back and forth dialogue. And Lloyd, maybe, and Braden, we can probably unshare the screen, that way everybody can see us. So Lloyd, to your comment about that it's hard to find you or just kind of the DoD contacts in general, we did have a question about, can I contact Lloyd? So how do you want us to, how would somebody contact you specifically?
So I know that you guys have my contact information. So, I mean, I am absolutely happy for you to share that with people, especially if it's about my area of expertise. For the most part, if it's going to be something that's not in my field of area, I can figure out who you do need to contact. I'm happy to work through that sort of a mechanism. If I get 100 emails off of this, that might be a little challenging to start dealing with, but I'm absolutely happy to have conversations with anybody and point them to the people that I am able to point them to.
Gotcha.
Awesome. Great. Very kind of you. So when people are planning to come to MHSRS, what should they bring with them? Should they bring a bunch of products? Should they bring handouts, pens with their logos on them? Like, seriously, what would you advise for those who have never been to MHSRS before?
Well, flyers always fun, and I don't mind getting pins and buttons and whatever. But I think probably the really nice thing, certainly small like flyers or brochures are nice, because they're, large booklets or presentations are probably not the best way to go, because we may not have time to deal with them. And if I come home with 50 of those, I'm probably not going to get
Yeah.
through it. Smaller things, you know, the elevator pitches are great. You know, one of the things that I've learned is that the first year that I went to MHSRS as a program manager, no one knew who I was, and I had a lot of time to walk around and do stuff. From that point forward, I'm constantly having time. I'm constantly having meetings, and I love that. Even though I'm an introvert and it exhausts me, I actually do love doing that, and it's just the most valuable thing in the world. So I may not have huge amounts of time to sit down and go through exhaustive sorts of presentations, but if we have smaller, you know, elevator pitch type of things or whatever, then we can always do follow-ups after the fact. And product demonstrations are great too. So.
Okay. Short product demonstrations though, right?
Yeah. Well, so in other words, if someone has some sort of a type of bandage and they have it wrapped up in the little thing or whatever, well, it's great to just kind of see what it looks like, because sometimes that can clue us into problems that we may see.
Yeah.
You know, when I mentioned from a military standpoint, oh, well, that's kind of big. That may not be suitable for what we need. You might need to shrink that down. You know, those sort of questions.
Right. Okay. And I get this question a lot. Should the CEO of a company go? Should the research director go? Should a salesperson go? Like, how do you answer that question? And maybe it's all of them for different things, but how would you respond to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I've seen benefit from all of them, so I don't know that it's necessarily, I mean, I can certainly, if a research director or CTO comes, I can get into more technical conversations in that case, and that's fine, but sometimes that's not absolutely necessary, because I've also had conversations with the CEOs who themselves may be quite technically astute, so this is not to suggest that they don't have the knowledge necessary to carry on those sort of conversations either. I think it's an either or. I don't know that it's necessarily one is terribly better than the other.
Okay.
Like
And
everybody can have an advantage from being there.
Okay, that's good to know. And then this exhibit hall, what's your take on that? Is it worth it to get a booth, or is it better just to walk around and see the other booths? You as a program manager, are you consciously thinking, oh, I got to go to the booths? Like, what's your take on that whole exhibit hall?
So yeah, I definitely walk the exhibit hall. So you know, I'm not always like I do go to some of the booths specifically because I feel like there's a particular call that I'm like, well, I need to make sure that this company, I need to see what they're doing because they may be of value to the Institute. So I didn't mention, in terms of the Institute, I'm the government program manager. They have their own director, their own CTO, their own, you know, all of that sort of stuff. So I don't get into the day-to-day operations, and their technology officer is the one who knows everything that they need. If I see a company that's producing something that's worthwhile, I may go talk to them myself, or I may just make sure that the Institute knows these people, because BioFab will be at MHSRS and I will send them places as well. So that it can be useful to have a booth, because then it's like they're over here at booth number 365, and then you can be tracked down to a specific location.
Okay. What about the poster presentations and that whole abstract competition? And I have to say, I have noticed over the years, it's gotten way more competitive. It used to be you submitted and pretty much you got selected. Now it's really competitive. And so again, what's your perspective on those? And do you stake out time to really make sure you look at them? Do you think other program managers are doing that? Is it the end of the world if you're not selected? Like, what are your thoughts on all that?
I'll start by saying it is not the end of the world.
Okay.
You know, so just the primary issue has been that for the long period of time, they wanted to include everybody that they could. And so they gradually added more poster sessions to accommodate that. But now we're at 3 poster sessions, and it gets to a point where it's a little bit overwhelming, both in terms of space and the sort of work that's involved in kind of trying to organize all of that. So the last couple, well, this year that certainly happened. The last 2 years, it's hard to say what it means because there was no meeting. But they actually started asking us to be more strict with what we could or couldn't have, what we chose or didn't choose. It's that I would be more happy just being more lenient on that, but then they were like, no, you need to cut some posters. So some people got rejected that in past years might not have, and it's purely because of the numbers. It's purely, we had to do that because of the numbers, but then we had to start figuring out, well, which ones are less relevant. So some of the ones that got rejected out of my session on biomanufacturing, for example, it was because they marginally met kind of the interests of the various sessions, but didn't really fit well into any of them. And so I've said, well, those are the ones that have to be rejected, unfortunately. Yeah. So I mean, it's if you can get a poster, that's great. Obviously, you get to then talk to people who come by and look at it. But even if you don't have a poster or are not part of the breakout sessions in that way, that obviously, as I said, I really value just being able to talk to people in general, not because I'm necessarily staking out their posters or whatever.
Right. Okay. That's good. So don't overthink it, try and make the most of it, but don't overthink it if you're not selected or you don't see their poster. Right. And then would you say people should prepare, and then we're going to do questions from other people. I'm just trying to warm up Lloyd here, and you're doing an awesome job. Thank you. Would you say people should come prepared to talk science or keep it light, almost like 8th grade level? Like, what's your advice on walking that line?
Yeah, so I think you really need to be prepared for both, because you're going to run into people specifically, like if people from the various DoD labs come, they're scientists. So they're probably going to be interested in talking to you about science, especially if it's a poster or something like that, because you're presenting at a science symposium. Mm-hmm. If you're at a booth, it's not necessarily the situation that you're going to need to do deep dives into the technology, because the people who are talking to you may be more interested in the capabilities your products to provide rather than how it does it. So you kind of have to feel that out based on who you're talking to. If someone wants to deep dive into the science, well, by all means. But if they're not deep diving into the science, I would probably keep it at a higher level. Just you don't want people's eyes glazing over. Right.
So it's a little of both. Okay. Mm-hmm. This is awesome. How about we take some of these questions that are coming in, Greg, if you want to help with that. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. So questions from the audience, just kind of in random order. How can we pitch a contract opportunity to develop medical prototypes for melanoma prevention in hostile environments? That's pretty specific. I don't, but that's
so I'll be honest up front. So I'm not on the procurement side. I'm on the research and development side. So my expertise is probably not as suitable for those sorts of questions. However, I will say that if from the research side, I would talk, the people you probably need to talk to are the operational medicine folks. So military operational medicine is one of the program committees here that run specific types of stuff. They do the stress, the eating disorders, the sleep deprivation, performance in stressful environments, all of that sort of stuff. And so that would, and also injury prevention and return to duty, they're kind of responsible for a lot of that. And so they would be the right ones to talk to, and they may actually have better contacts for the procurement side of things.
Okay. And actually just this dialogue now reminds me a lot of when we go to MHSRS that, when we talk to program managers, it may not be that they are the ones that's going to have the answer, but just as you just did, you kind of point people in the right direction where you can and say, hey, not my field, not my wheelhouse, but here's my knowledge of where you might want to be able to go or head in that direction. So there is a question here that I'll field. So somebody asked if there's a map ahead of time of the exhibit list, and yes, there is actually. So I can put into the chat when I have a little bit of time here, the actual link to the third party. So there's the MHSRS homepage, and you can go to that, but you want to notice that there's a different link. It's a .net link that is actually the official registration. It has the agenda. And if you search at the top kind of searchable links, there is a an opportunity to look at the exhibit hall, and there is a map and you can zoom in and see everybody that's listed there. So yes, that is absolutely available. Let's take a step back to kind of elevator pitches or the materials that Liz talked about. So what to bring, but what advice would you give to people who, you know, knowing you're busy, you've got meetings back to back, you're seeing a lot of people, but somebody wants to just kind of quickly talk to you. How should somebody come prepared with like an elevator pitch? What types of things are you looking for they should include in that to just kind of get in quick and easy?
So I think one thing is to try and make sure that it's right up front. We know what sort of an indication you're going for. If it's a medical product, you know, if you're going to treat specific things, how are you going to treat them and where would you use it? So one thing that is very distinct about how military uses things is we have to have what's called a CONOPS, a concept of operations. How is it going to be used? Where is it going to be used? When is it going to be used? And like, I'll give an example of that. And these are questions that we're always going to have when we're talking about things that are going to be fielded. Now, if they're going to be used at a hospital here, it's not quite so specific. But if you're having a patient, have a soldier who's injured out in the middle of nowhere, and it may be a while before they can get back to formal medical treatment of some kind, they may need to be stabilized, and they're going to be treated probably by someone who is not a physician. They're going to be treated by a combat medic, or maybe not even a combat medic, depending on, you know, what the circumstances are. So it has to be things that are easily used. It has to be things that will have been carried in a backpack, will not have power supply, will not have cold chain. All of the logistics questions then come into play. And as we move through these various roles of care, from the earliest point of injury at role 1 all the way up through what we call role 4, which is a US-based hospital, there's different capabilities to have various medical supplies and expertise to use them. And so it's that goes to, when you come to MHSRS with a product, it's nice if you have a clear idea of what its requirements are going to be in terms of power usage, training, how heavy it is, how big it is. All those sort of things kind of play into our understanding of where your product can be used.
Okay, great. Somebody asks about, and I think that we can kind of just give some resources here, but somebody asked about the layout for the poster and tables and stuff. I would divert you to the MHSRS registration website. All of that information is there. It's a very, very easy to use website. And I'll let Liz after this question. I'll ask another question and then I'll put the link in the chat so everybody has it. But there is a frequently asked questions, and for those people who have been accepted for posters, be on the lookout for emails, because if you've been accepted, they will send you an email with all of the details about how to lay out the posters and how big they have to be and all of that stuff. And be sure to check your junk or spam mail, because sometimes it gets kicked over to there. So with that, Liz, I'm going to let you ask some of these other questions, and I'll put that other link in the chat.
Okay, sounds good. What's a good, okay. Can you talk about how the FAR impacts what the government will discuss with industry and academia at MHSRS and elsewhere?
So I can talk a little bit about that. It really depends on whether there is an active solicitation, or, you know, or if the government has put out a request for proposals, whether that's for procurement or research and development sorts of things, they're very limited on what they can talk to you about. There are some alternative sorts of situations where it's not quite so strict. So for example, if the solicitation has been put out through something like MTech and it's not for another transaction, that is not FAR based. And so the rules are slightly different. And if there is no solicitation at all, there's nothing really nobody is barred from talking about any of those sort of issues. Now, if there's planning going on, they're not going to tell you we're going to be putting out a solicitation necessarily. But in terms of talking about what the government's needs might be, I don't think there's any restrictions if there's not a solicitation out that the FAR would prevent.
Okay. And then I think we kind of danced around it, but maybe being very literal and precise. What is the best way to meet program managers at the conference? Do you meet at booths? Like, how do you actually find people?
Yeah, so probably the best way is to go to the breakout sessions of the program managers that you're going to want to talk to. You know, if you don't, I mean, now you've seen my picture, so maybe you can randomly stumble across me at the conference. But if not, I have a session on biomedical manufacturing. And so if you come to that, then feel free to approach me, you know, preferably after that, because I'll probably be stressed in the immediate time preceding it. But, and you know, even if it's just to give me a card, we can try and set up the time for some time later. For the most part, I think that's going to be true for all the program managers. I mean, sometimes this is personality driven and they may be less open to that. All I can say is from my own experience, the people that I have dealt with, we're pretty willing to engage, and that's the best way to find us.
Yeah, I love that advice. That is exactly what we do at G2G. We study the agenda, the breakout sessions, and then we divide and conquer, and we go talk to the leaders and the speakers of the sessions and just grab them and be ready for a 5-minute or less conversation. And the key is just to sort of make sure there's a match there. There's an interest, get the card, give the 1-page handout, you know, and leave. And don't take up too much time is always been my thought, because I know you're getting hit up by so many people that we don't want to burden you. So.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah, well, we're trying. Okay. At the moment, the agenda only shows the moderators for each breakout session. Can I look them up? Oh, I can look them up on LinkedIn, but what about the other panel members? So a lot of those panelist speakers, they don't come up with till much closer to the event, but I don't know if you have advice on that.
They should show up eventually. So I know that there were still some corrections that they were making. Like even they asked us to say, okay, give us your time slots and all the speakers and their presentation titles and all that sort of stuff. And I sent that back in when they asked for it. And I had an email 2 weeks ago saying your times are all messed up. And sure enough, they were. So I had to fix that. So they're still putting that together, but I anticipate that they'll have that available in the not too distant future.
Great.
Yeah.
So I did put in the chat the link for the main website, so be sure to check that out. And another question here is, can you help with the distinction between program manager and a portfolio manager? Are they the same? Are they different?
Yeah, it's not completely cut and dry, but the portfolio manager, which was my previous position. Okay, so the portfolio manager worked really in the earlier R&D side. So when I was the regenerative medicine portfolio manager, I was looking at this, and it was all of the stuff that was generally, you know, discovery science up through early clinical sort of stuff. And all of those sort of projects fell within my purview. At a certain point, though, we start transitioning these things as they become more advanced. We transition them to our advanced developers, and those are generally product managers. So product managers are the ones that are actually taking a product through like the mid to late clinical stages for eventual procurement. Program managers are a little bit different. I don't know if they're quite so specific in what I have dealt with at the DoD. They can kind of span the whole range of all of this. So it's a little bit more generic in some respects. I guess I hate to define my own position as generic, but nevertheless, it doesn't quite align itself perfectly with the technology development piece the way the other two titles do. In the long run, I'm not certain that it necessarily makes that much difference, as long as they're a person who can either help you directly or put you in touch with the people you need to talk to.
Okay, great. So you may have answered this while I was typing in the link before, but there is a question about trying to schedule meetings ahead of time. And what's your thought on that? Do you generally have time for that? We actually have a perspective here, so I'm actually interested in what you would say.
So I have done that in the past, but usually what I end up doing with that is, well, I'm not even going to say that. I'm actually not opposed to that. It's just if I get overwhelmed, then it becomes a little bit more of a problem. If it's just 5 or 6 sort of things, then I don't mind doing that necessarily. So, and I'll tell people if I can't, if it just becomes too much, if I just can't do it, then it's because what I don't want to do is just like block off, the entire day for 10 hours just having meetings. I mean, I do kind of end up doing that when I go to various other meetings like Bio International or, Cell and Gene meeting on the Mesa, because that's how they're set up.
Yeah.
But this meeting is not set up exactly like that. So I try to leave it a little more free flowing.
That's awesome. Okay. There seems to be a common thread here that ties back to something you'd said earlier about that we're not always easy to find. And so we may have already answered this, but it's another kind of take on it. But if somebody doesn't already know the program managers that they're interested in, or whether they'll be at MHSRS, where should they start? Like, how do they get that information?
So, honestly, you guys are the sorts of people who help a lot with that, because you have the experience already with figuring out who we are, and then you can put your clients in touch with us. So let's see. Primarily, where I have been able to have kind of people reach out to me is just by other people who know me or at these conferences. You can submit kind of emails to various, if you have questions or want to work with the military or something, but I don't know how effective those really are. So, at the risk of saying I don't know any better answer, I really think it kind of boils down to being in touch with the people who have those contacts, like yourselves, like Greg and Liz, or coming to the meetings like MHSRS or other ones. I mean, I go to other ones and my name is in the contact thing. The partnering sorts of apps that they set up for a lot of those meetings. And I put my organization, so there I am with the U.S. Army. So.
Great. So there's another just general question that I'll refer you back to for participants back to the website. There's a question about the cost for the event and if you go one day versus all of that. I'll mention that it's $650 for the 4 days. I think it's $430, and that's a civilian rate. But really, any types of logistical questions like that, the website is super, super helpful and really easy to navigate and provides that sort of information.
But it's way more cost effective just to buy a ticket for the whole conference.
True. Yes.
Yeah.
So then, any insights on significant DoD funding for regen medicine coming back, or any thoughts on kind of funding in general like that?
So yes, I think so. Assuming no more pandemics, cross your fingers and all of that, because that's where a lot of money that could have gone to kind of keep things going kind of got siphoned away to deal with emergency sorts of scenarios. A lot of the research, the medical research for the Department of Defense is transitioning over to the Defense Health Agency, and the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The Army has always funded the majority of medical research for the DoD. However, each of the services have their own specific pieces that are just hyper specific, like undersea medicine. Well, I mean, that's pretty specific to the Navy, and it doesn't make sense for anybody not the Navy to take on that piece of research. However, at the Defense Health Agency, it's joint. So all of the services, and they also manage all of the military treatment facilities here in the United States, which are the Role 4 sorts of facilities that I mentioned earlier. And that's where the sorts of things that are regenerative medicine focused are likely to be used. So, and I know that there are people at Defense Health Agency who are interested in finding ways to fund that research. And Congress has put some language in the most recent NDAA regarding regenerative medicine. So my hope is that these things are cyclical to some extent. We've kind of been at the bottom of the trough for the past couple of years in terms of the amount of funding for regenerative medicine. But I'm hopeful that we're trending back upwards. That's about all I can say, but I'm hopeful.
Okay. Liz, any questions from your end that you want to run through?
These are great questions that people are posting here, by the way. I'm seeing a lot of specific questions about your work, Lloyd, skin substitutes, regenerative medicine opportunities, funding opportunities in the future. So I don't know if you want to talk specifically electrospinning. So if there's anything specific you want to say about your particular focus area and where you see opportunities, or do you think there'll be more funding, or do you think they're pulling back on funding?
Yeah, so, so when it comes to specific technologies that are used for regenerative medicine, I myself am completely agnostic to that. In other words, I don't decide that, no, we have to do 3D printing, or we have to do electrospinning, or we have to do it this way, or decellularizing and recellularizing. I'm not whichever one works, for me, it doesn't make any difference. And I've seated on panels, sat on panels, and I have been involved with research programs at CDMRP that fund every single one of those types of research. And so like at BioFabUSA, individuals who have been developing a technology or a therapeutic are coming to the Institute with this therapeutic with whatever biomaterials they're using, whichever strategy they're using. And so that's fine. If it works and it turns out that's the way that it's going to be best, then it's perfectly fine. And the Institute actually can fund some of that research too. It's only in a very particular space, like they're not funding clinical trials through the Institute, and they are not funding preclinical development. But when you've got to that point where you have to figure out how you're going to manufacture this stuff for both small rate stuff, like for a phase 1 clinical trial, you need to be able to manufacture just a small amount, and then also make sure it's scalable. So when you're ready to do a phase 2 or 3 trials, you can scale it up and do more. The Institute can help do that, and they can actually utilize government funding, their core funding from the DoD to help do that. So there's some funding available there. And of course, CDMRP continues to fund quite a bit of regenerative medicine research through specific programs like the peer-reviewed orthopedic research program, joint warfighter research program. There's a military burn research program. Sometimes, what they're looking for changes a little bit every year. So even if last year you were able to submit an application because it fit perfectly, it may not fit perfectly this year. So I encourage you to just make sure you're addressing the focus area that they have in the most current solicitations. And MTech, as I mentioned, a lot of the stuff that's coming out of MRDC this year is solicited through MTech. So in both MTech and BioFab, you don't have to actually be a member to see the solicitations and even to respond to them in some cases. It's just you have, if you get funded, if you get selected for funding, you have to become a member in order to actually get the funding. So those two I can say for certain. Now, whether there's regenerative medicine specific pieces that get solicited through MTech, I don't see that right yet, but as I said, I am hopeful that that's something that could happen in the future.
Great. Is there a reference work showing the various funding entities and their relationship to each other? And they give an example like JP05, Army X-Tech, AFWorks, and where are they in the DoD?
You know what? I wish they did, because I don't even know where all of those organizations are in the DoD, and that's what happens when you work for the most giant bureaucracy in the government. Yeah, I don't necessarily have a good feel for all of those. Some of them I do know, but other ones, and the Army reorganized last year or a couple years ago, and I'm still trying to figure out kind of where everybody fits now. So yeah, that's always going to be a challenge, and I don't necessarily have the best answers.
Yep. Speaking of the change, can you say a little bit about the Defense Health Agency change and what that means and what it looks like now and what's on the horizon?
So I can give it a try. We're all still kind of working through all of the details of that. In general, like I mentioned, the services are going to maintain certain programs that are hyper specific to that particular service. But starting October 1st, all of us here at MRDC are not going to be in the Army anymore. We are going to be in the Defense Health Agency. So all of the sorts of things that are considered joint requirements, which means everything for all of the services and for things that aren't specifically service related, like the military treatment facilities like Walter Reed and all of that sort of stuff. That all now falls under the Defense Health Agency. And what they want to prioritize, they're still working through some of the details of how they're going to prioritize research and funding. So I'm hoping that becomes clearer over the next year. I don't think I'm going to have answers on October 1st about exactly how that's going to work, but it's going to be different than the way the Army has done things. And at a certain point, we'll probably be able to answer those questions better, maybe next MHSRS. It's may live in interesting times, as the old Chinese proverb goes, and it's going to be some interesting times for the next year as we try to figure out how all that's supposed to work.
Great. Thanks, Lloyd. I'm cognizant of our time, so I want to kick it over to Liz and you for some final words. And I'll just say on my behalf too, thank you, Lloyd. Thanks everybody for joining us. But let me kick it over to Liz for closing this out.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been such a great discussion and great questions from everyone. Really appreciate those. And it's interesting, Lloyd, this whole changeover with the consolidation under DHA. I mean, that's been going on for so many years, because I remember before COVID, them talking about it at MHSRS and how they were slowly moving to manage all the MTFs. And so it's really has been several years, and then boom, we have this pandemic, which totally upset everything, clearly for a while. So things are always evolving. I feel like that's the takeaway, like things are always evolving within DoD. And this conference is such a great opportunity to get insights and sort of get on the pulse of what's happening within DoD, find out what the priorities are. And I've also found it's such a rich audience or participation of folks that run the gamut, from clinicians to researchers to not just DoD, VA, FDA, BARDA, other folks, businesses, universities. It's just such a great range. And so I'm super excited to be able to go back again after the 2-year hiatus. And folks like you really do make it possible for companies that are working in this health innovation space to connect and really help the warfighter. And so I want to thank you for sharing your insights, for always being so great to work with. And if you have any final thoughts, advice, I welcome that. And just want to thank you again.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me. This has been great. The questions were all right on target, I think. No more particular advice, but just looking forward to seeing everyone.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for dialing in, and we'll see you in a few weeks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.